welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared, and man, did this video take forever to prepare. I wanted to get this out sooner, but this was a hard one. Sometimes that happens. So this video is going to be all about Israel. In particular, the invasion of Israel, how quickly it can happen, where are we at right now, what's going on in the world, what's going on in the region, what's going on in the country. And we have this interesting incident that just happened. This is just a couple days ago, April 16th. Today's the 18th. Meteor explosion over northern Israel has people looking to the heavens. So, if you've been watching the channel for a while, that I find these meteor explosions significant. Not just like every meteor, not every shooting star, but ones like this that cause an audible noise because they're rare. But we're going to go over some of this story on Israel 365 News. We're going to look at Russia and a meteor that happened over there. But another thing that I was thinking around the same time that this happened is I was thinking about Israel and how small it is geographically, and thinking, you know what? It can't be that hard to invade it and take over. Now, I'm familiar with Israel's past, how miraculously they've stayed a country. They've been able to fight off these invasions. There were a couple times where they could have ceased to be a nation, and we're actually going to go over that. But what I've been thinking is, I'm of the opinion, as most of you know, that things can happen very quickly. There's others that think that things are going to take a long time, and that things are going to be so much more obvious when it comes to the lead up to the second coming. And I don't think so, because I think that this is all intended to be a test. This world, this mortal life that we're going through, it's a test to see if you'll follow the commandments or not, if you'll obey Christ and accept Him and enter the covenant path. And so, giving a big warning sign out that just everybody will recognize would kind of go against that. And that was reiterated in the Christmas devotional by Elder Neil L. Anderson when he talked about when Christ came the first time. He answered the question, why didn't people know until the day before he came? And his answer was, it's because it's a test. Nephi the prophet, he didn't know that Christ was coming into the world until the day before he was born. And the answer as to why is because it's a test. And now, even more than when he came the first time, it's really a test because the wicked are going to be destroyed off the earth. So, in my mind, it doesn't make a lot of sense that there would be a super obvious war going on that's been raging for a couple years or whatever, or even the better part of a year, because I think that would set the alarm bells off for a lot of people. I could be wrong. I don't know. But I was just thinking about how Israel, I wonder if there's a chance that it could be invaded very quickly simply because of its land size. Okay, it's a tiny, tiny country. Look at it compared to, look at it compared to these European countries over here. It's so much small. Here's Israel right here where my mouse is. Compare that to Spain. It's smaller than Portugal over here. That's where my mom's from. And Portugal already is a pretty small country compared to the rest of Europe. Compare it to over here in the US. It's smaller. It looks like it's probably even smaller than New Hampshire and Vermont. I could look it up and look at the square kilometers, square miles, so I'm not going to, but needless to say, it's small. And compare it to up here, you see all this red? This is what's been invaded by Russia as part of the Ukraine war. And Russia has already taken a very, very large area compared to Israel. And on top of that, okay, you have to look at Israel closely, because I pulled up this population density map, and most of their population is kind of right here in this small little area right here, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and the outlying areas. And then, maybe a little bit more broadly, you could say kind of like this right here. If you can see my mouse, it's just kind of like this. That's it. That's basically Israel. There isn't anybody living down here in the Negev desert. Of course there's people there, but you know what I mean. So effectively, um, if your intent was to invade, it doesn't seem like it would be too difficult. Now, I'm not oblivious to the fact that Israel has a very strong military, and I have some tabs pulled up here where we're going to compare militaries later on. So, let's get back to the meteor, okay? And then let's go through just everything. How fast can this happen? What's the perfect storm that's brewing right now for Israel? And what could that future conflict look like? Okay, so first, let's go back to this meteor story, Israel 365. Okay, oops. I forgot I can't really zoom in for some reason on Israel 365, but that's okay. A meteor exploded over northern Israel in an astronomical event that was heard all over the country on Saturday afternoon at around 5:16 p.m. I highlighted Saturday because in Judaism, that's the Sabbath day. There was a loud explosion on a Saturday, on a Sabbath day in Israel. The airburst was reported by the Israeli Astronomical Association. All right, quote. This is from Igal Pat L., a member of the International Astronomical Union. This is what he said about the event. Quote, meteors are observed every night, but seeing one from an inhabited place in daylight and over Israel is very rare. No debris has been found. It is likely nothing survived the trip to the ground. Okay, so you have this guy. This is a very rare occurrence, and it's happening at a really tense time. I think a really important time. Let's continue. Okay, Polish book told the Jerusalem Post, quote, it's larger than a common meteor, but smaller compared to the Chelyabinsk event. What was Chelyabinsk? Well, this is where things for me, and I think some of you, get interesting. Here's my Second Coming timeline. We haven't visited this in a while, but right here in the purple, this row right here, on the 15th of February, there was this crazy meteor that exploded over Russia. It had the force of several nuclear bombs. I can't remember what the yield was, but it was that kind of strength. It damaged buildings, it caused injuries, and it was over Russia. Chelyabinsk, Russia. 1 year later, okay, the same month, I don't know the exact day. I still haven't put that down on here for some reason. But almost exactly a year later, that's when Russia annexed Crimea from Ukraine. And as you know, this is connected to the larger Ukraine conflict between Russia and Ukraine. As far as like taking land goes and military action, it really kind of started with Crimea. But that was preceded by this insane, rare meteor over Russia a year earlier. And it was loud and it was bright. I think it was actually brighter than the sun. When you watch the videos for it, you at first, if you're just looking at like a still or like if the video is paused, you think it's the sun, but it's not. It's the meteor. It was super bright. Okay. So you had this, which has led to this war that's going on right now. We don't know what the end result of the war is going to be yet. It's still ongoing. But you had that happen. Okay. I think it's interesting. Um, and then, not to be a broken record, but I just think that this is worth repeating. 2020. Okay. 2020, Angel Moroni dropped his trumpet Oh, by the way, it was the 77th day of the year. Okay. But he dropped his trumpet from the Salt Lake Temple as a result of an earthquake in the West Valley, uh, like near Magna, Utah. And 2 days later, on the 20th, the first presidency put out the message to call the missionaries home. 5 days after that, all temples worldwide were closed because of the pandemic. Okay, so that was on 3. It was the month of March, so 3/18/2020, and then 2 years later, in August, the 8th month of the year, and on the 13th day, so 8/13, the mirror reverse date, there was a large meteor boom over Salt Lake and over northern Utah, basically all as far south as Provo, and then up into southern Idaho. That it was also a rare occurrence. Okay, and this was just months after the General Conference, where there was a big call out for missionaries. So it seems like these two things, in my mind, they're related. It has to do with missionary work, how it went quiet for a time, but then there was just like this big call out, boom, just everybody please serve a mission. Okay, and now we have this meteor over Israel. Okay, let's continue with the story. I'm going to read just a little bit about the way that Jews, the way that they view meteors, or like what it says in the Talmud. Okay, so meteors were already known to the Talmudic sages. In the tractate of Barakot, 58b, Shmuel says, quote, "The paths of the sky are as clear to me as the paths of my city, Nahardia, except for comets. That I do not know what they are." End quote. He then explained that a comet would be the harbinger of the end of days. Now, why does that matter to us? Do we have the Talmud as part of our standard works? No, we don't. But, like I've said before in the past, it's important to view things from a Jewish perspective because they are also the Lord's people. They are the other part of Israel. And the Lord is going to make a special appearance to them. So I think we would do well to see things from their point of view, because the Lord is going to work with them in their own language, in a way that they understand. So if they kind of see comets, meteors as harbingers of the end of days, it may just be that some of them are looking at it this way. And, it made the Israel 365 news under their Bible news portion. So there are the religious there that would view this as a sign. And so if it's a sign to them, then it could probably be a sign to us that the Lord is working with them, preparing them for the second coming. Okay, continuing, quote, "We learn through tradition that a comet does not pass the Orion constellation, and if it does pass Orion, the world will be destroyed." End quote. Indeed, a potentially apocalyptic meteor is one of the pre-messianic astronomical signs described in Jewish sources. The Zohar describes the appearance of many unusual stars. Quote, "After 40 days, when the pillar rises from the earth to heaven in the eyes of the whole world, and the Messiah has appeared, a star will rise up on the east, blazing in all colors, and 7 other stars will surround that star, and they will wage war on it." Okay, so that's all that we really need to know. Oh yeah, there was one more thing here at the end. It says, "In any case, Jews are commanded to recite a blessing upon seeing comets that praises God, quote, whose strength and power fill the world." So I think that's interesting. And when they use the word comets, I think they're using it in the like ancient sense, where they probably would have classified something like this meteor as a comet. I'm not sure that they had maybe a separate word for meteors and comets, so I think that's why this article is written this way. So anyway, they took note of it. There's a video here that you can go watch if you want. So I think this is pretty interesting. If this follows the pattern of Russia, then I don't know, maybe a year from now, something's going to happen. In fact, let's take a look a year from now. Let's just say that it happened to the very day. So April uh, of 2024, the 16th doesn't happen really on any significant day, just right off the top of my head. However, you'll note that we'll have had a general conference, and then the day after general conference on the 8th, this is going to be the day of the eclipse, the next great American eclipse. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, going back to 2023, let's go back here. The 16th, it was on, well, on our calendar that was Sunday, but in Israel, I guess it would have been the 15th. I don't know, but he said Saturday. So anyway, let's go with this. The Sabbath, okay, to them. So nothing really was going on there. There is this Shabbat Mavarakim Kodesh Iyar, which I don't know what that is, and you can't click on it. Usually you can click on these things and they'll tell the significance, but I don't know what that is. But anyway, it came just a couple days after Passover had ended. Passover ended on the 13th, and then this happened a couple days afterward. We're still in Ramadan. Ramadan's going to end on the last day is going to be the 20th. So, but we are in that 10-day period, which is the holiest part of Ramadan. But that's going to end after the 20th. Okay, so let's go back to talking about Israel, shall we? Okay, so NBC News, I just wanted to show this just so you know I'm not making this up. And it says this other places too. Okay, and this is from April 11th, so about 7 days ago. After weeks of rising tensions, Israel's dueling crises, one over national security, the other over domestic polities, are increasingly bleeding into each other, fueling a perfect storm that analysts say has left Israel vulnerable on more fronts simultaneously than at any other point in recent memory. So, what are these? What are the different? Is it crises? What are they? What are they all? So, of course, there's Iran, and we're gonna talk about Iran in particular, like the details going on there. But we have Iran. We have this flaring of tensions because of because of the overlap of Passover and Ramadan this year. We have internally talk of civil war, which I don't know how likely that is, but there is a lot of strife within the country because the government, led by Netanyahu, they want to change things with the high court or their judicial branch, which is causing a lot of protests. Lots and lots and lots of people are protesting, and they've talked about civil war. And you have military personnel in the reserves. I think it may just be in the reserves, but that's like the main bulk of the Israeli military that haven't shown up for training, haven't shown up for duty. So that affects, military readiness. Um, so you have that going on. You have Saudi Arabia that seems to be realigning itself with the East, with Iran and China and Russia, and we're going to go over that in just a little bit. You just have all these different things that are kind of converging all at the same time. And not to mention, the other part of the perfect storm is that you have the Ukraine war going on. So this is taking the attention of Europe, right? Europe in the West is watching Russia and what it's doing. And so not focusing so much on Israel because we don't know what's going to happen up here. Russia has threatened nuclear bombs and stuff like that, which you have to take seriously, even if you don't think it's going to happen. So the West is really kind of concerned with Russia. Okay. And then on top of that, because Russia did this, I know that there's been concern that, okay, if Russia's going to take parts of Ukraine, then maybe China is going to be next, and it's going to go ahead and do what it's wanted to do for a long time and take control of Taiwan, because China views Taiwan as a renegade province, essentially, right? So now the West has to worry about Russia, it has to worry about China and Taiwan, and just general Chinese aggression. So there's a lot of different things going on that's making it so that we can't just focus on Israel, but especially just in general, there's so many countries that are against Israel anyway. It makes it a really bad situation, I think. So I think that's the perfect storm. Okay. So Iran, this is like the most immediate threat. We went over this recently. U.S. Army Chief, Iran could produce enough material for nuclear bomb or nuclear weapon within 2 weeks, and this was back on March 24th. So we are now past those 2 weeks. I don't know where things stand right now. I tried to find the most updated stuff that I could, but it says here Iran could produce enough fissile material for a nuclear weapon within 2 weeks and would only need several additional months to assemble the weapon for use. U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman Mark Milley said Thursday. Additionally, later in the article, U.S. officials previously estimated Iran's so-called breakout time to amass material for a weapon as weeks. The U.S. also believes Iran does not yet have all the technology required to build a bomb and has not made a final decision to build a weapon. And then later, despite the warning, Israel has avoided laying out a quote-unquote red line regarding when it will act, as Netanyahu did during the Obama administration. Sorry about that. There was a bug that landed on the microphone. The Israeli official told Axios that Israel was avoiding declaring that its quote-unquote red line is 90% purity because it fears that might give Iran the legitimacy to continue enriching up to that level. The U.S. intelligence community continues to maintain its assessment that Iran isn't pursuing an atomic bomb. Okay, I don't know why that just skipped. Okay. Quote, to the best of our knowledge, this is the U.S. talking, we don't believe that the supreme leader in Iran has yet made a decision to resume the weaponization program that we judge they suspended or stopped at the end of 2003, says CIA Director Williams Burns told CBS's Face the Nation program last month. Continuing, though, he says, but the other two legs of the stool remain enrichment programs. They've obviously advanced very far. So I guess the U.S. isn't too worried about it, although they say that things could happen very quick. So, okay, if I understand right, okay, so let's go through this again. Enough material for a weapon within 2 weeks, and would only need several additional months to assemble the weapon. But then later they said that the U.S. doesn't believe that they have the technology required to build a bomb and has not made a final decision. So I don't know. I don't really know what to think about that. Here's another assessment right here. This is Iran Watch. And they say Iran's nuclear program has reached the point at which within 3 to 4 weeks, Iran might be able to enrich enough uranium for 5 fission bombs or weapons. For that uranium to pose a nuclear weapon threat, however, it would have to be processed further, and the other components of a successful weapon have to be ready to receive the processed uranium. Weaponization activities could take anywhere from several months to a year or more, although the time frame is uncertain. Some of these activities could be done in parallel with the fissile material production and could take place on a laboratory scale, which would make them difficult to detect. And then here it has a few different tables. 1 weapon, less than 1 week. 2 weapons, less than 1 week. This is estimated minimum time it would take the centrifuges presently installed in production mode at Natanz to enrich enough uranium for one weapon. It'd be 1 week. 2 weapons, also 1 week. Anyway, so here you go. So they're getting close, but I guess, it's unknown whether they've actually decided to do it. It's just, I don't know. It's confusing to me. But Netanyahu readies strike on Iran nuclear facilities after secret meetings. Now, this is from a month ago, and this is on Fox News. Israel will prepare for possible action against Iran's nuclear facilities after a series of secret meetings between the prime minister and leaders from the defense and intelligence ministries, according to a leaked report. Quote, Israel will not allow Iran to become nuclear. Brigadier General of the Reserves, Amir Avivi, founder and chairman of the Israeli Defense Security Forum, told Fox News Digital. Continuing the quote, as we are witnessing the continued unhindered progress of the Iranian military nuclear program with weapons-grade enrichment, Israel is readying its credible military option, end quote. So, if that happens, just, I don't know. It just seems like that would be a big escalation if Israel attacks Iran. Okay, now let's take a step back and let's talk about Israel in general and how it's a miracle. So, in other words, it seems like in order for Israel to even exist right now, it's a miracle. It's being protected by a miracle bubble, so to speak, right? So, I would assume that if that bubble went away, they would be gone. So, here we go. Let's start at the very beginning. The 5 miracles of Israel. This is on Jewish Journal. The first miracle is the astonishing idea of a people that waited nearly 1900 years to return home. Yeah, that is. I'm not aware of any other time that's happened in history. I could be wrong, but I'm not aware of any time. So that's the first miracle in this article. Second miracle, fighting off 5 Arab armies whose sole mission was to drive us into the sea. And we're going to get into the details of that in a little bit. The third miracle was the survival of the Jewish state for the past 74 years in the face of enemies sworn to its destruction. Yeah, we are coming up on Israel's 75th birthday in May, and we're going to talk about this whole thing with why this period of time is particularly crucial in Israel, but we'll get to that in a second. Okay, a higher force sent us the fourth miracle. The most powerful country in the history of humanity continues to have Israel's back, the United States of America. Now, that's significant, obviously, and we have a very unique view as members of the church as to why that is. Unique from the rest of Christianity, unique from the rest of the world. It's because we know that the United States is the land of New Jerusalem. All of North and South America are, but in particular, the United States, this is where the center place is, in Missouri, right? And this is where the church was restored in the last days. It was the United States. I don't know how other Christians view the United States. I know that they realize that it's special because I've heard them say it a lot, but our church really gives it meaning why it is special. And it's because this is the birthplace of humanity, is the United States. Yeah, and when I say United States, I mean over here on this side of the world. This is the real old world. It's so weird how it's backwards. We call the old world Asia, Europe, Africa, and stuff like that. But the real old world is the Americas, because this is where humanity originated from. This is where the Garden of Eden is. It's in Missouri. So it makes sense that the United States right now, as part of the Lord's plan, is helping to protect Israel and helping for this country to exist. If you think about it, let's look at the map. If you think about it, first, the United States had to exist in order for the restored church to come into being, right? And for the gathering of the 10 tribes. So this started first. And the United States also seems that it has the dual mission of making sure that this restoration over here, the Jews to Israel, takes place. It's kind of amazing how that works out. And like I've noted before, there's a reason why we have so many Jews here in the United States. In fact, I've done a whole video, or a couple videos, how the United States is kind of laid out like the tabernacle, or it's laid out like Solomon's temple or the second temple, where if you have, um, if the temple is kind of like right here in Kansas City, and you have the camp of Israel, because they were supposed to camp around the tabernacle in a certain way. You had Judah, that was in the east, and in the United States, this is where the majority of Jews are, in the northeast part of the country. But, pretty much almost directly east, really, of Kansas City, if you draw a line like this. And then you have Ephraim and Manasseh and Benjamin that are in the west, right here. And that's where the headquarters of the church is. And, um, most members of the church are from Ephraim and Manasseh. So it's significant, and it is a miracle. Yes, they correctly recognize that the United States is a miracle. Okay, the fifth miracle may be the most poignant of the five. Uh, being in such a hostile being in such a hostile neighborhood, Israel had every justification to develop a defensive crouch, a bunker mentality, a society obsessed with protection and survival at all costs. Instead, while defending itself, it found the chutzpah and imagination and drive to create a vibrant and open society that honors democracy and celebrates life. I don't know if that's the most poignant, but okay. That is the fifth miracle of Israel. Instead of settling for survival, it aimed a lot higher to thrive. Yes. Okay. Now, Israel, according to the Jews, okay, and I've heard this said a number of times now, Israel is in a very crucial time. They're in what's called the eighth decade. Okay. So this is from the Jerusalem Post. Herzog, which is the Israeli president in Israel, they have a prime minister and a president. The prime minister is the one that is more like what we would think of as the president in the United States. In the president is like I don't know. It's kind of like in Russia. They also have a prime minister and a president, but anyway, he's the lesser of the two. So Herzog is the president of Israel. Okay, it says here, Israel must not become divided and collapse before its 80th year, like ancient Jewish kingdoms, over the proposed judicial reforms. Israeli President Isaac Herzog urged on Tuesday at the Ashmoret 2023 conference. Quote, I see before my eyes the cleavages and rifts within us, which are getting deeper and deeper, and I cannot help but remember that twice in history, during the reigns of the House of David and the Hasmoneans, a Jewish state arose in the land of Israel, and twice she collapsed before reaching her 80th year. So when he's talking about the House of David, he's talking about when Israel was together, all the tribes together, right? That didn't last more than 70 or more than 80 years. And then the time of the Hasmoneans, that's like the Maccabees and at the time of the Greeks, um, or like after the Greeks. Okay, and then you have Naftali Bennett. He is the former Prime Minister of Israel. Wasn't there for very long. Bennett vows Bennett vows return to politics, urges U.S. Jews don't give up on Israel. This is from January of this year. And he said, okay, Bennett added that even though Israel was thriving in many ways, including its economy and its relative security, quote, we're in a very tense moment, pointing to internal strife similar to the problems that befell the two historical Jewish kingdoms in Israel in under 80 years. Gosh, it's annoying when it does that. Quote, twice we didn't pass through our eighth decade. Now we're in the middle of our eighth decade, and we have to pass it successfully. And what happened both times before, it wasn't an external enemy. We tore ourselves apart, he said. And then he continues, I'm worried because the discourse is so toxic. It's basically two tribes that don't listen to each other. So, well, we know the end of this story, and they do too. In their point of view, Messiah is going to come, and that is true. Although they're going to find out that it was Christ all along, and it's going to be his second coming. Um, Now I don't know what's going to happen. I don't, but it's not too hard for me to imagine that all this internal strife in talk of civil war could help lead to that final invasion. Because, like I've said before, if you're an enemy of Israel, it's a great time to attack. If they're fighting amongst themselves, whether it's an actual civil war or whether it's like stuff like this, like protests going on and just like a lot of upheaval, that's a time that you would probably want to do that. And then, like I said, everything that's going on in the region and in the world, everything's just kind of like come together right now in a way that it hasn't before. Yes, Israel has had other wars. Yes, there's been other, uprisings. There's been intifadas. There's been, um, all sorts of things that they've had to deal with. In fact, here's a list. Here's a list of all the wars that Israel's been involved in. The ones that I have highlighted, these are the ones where Israel could have actually ceased to be a nation, where it could have been destroyed. The first one was its War of Independence. Immediately as it became a country, it was attacked, and we're going to look at the details of that. So right here, the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, they could have ended right then. And then the Six-Day War in 1967, they could have ended, but they didn't. And then the Yom Kippur War as well. And if you'll recall, the recent videos I've been doing, as they're talking about the danger posed to Israel right now, they say that they haven't seen this much danger in this kind of a situation since the Yom Kippur War, October 1973. And what you'll notice about these wars, by the way, is they're all very short. They're very, very short. Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, an alternate name for that is the 10-Day War, because it was only 10 days. Or wait, I thought it was 10 days, but this is saying or 20-Day War? I could have sworn it was called the 10-Day War. Let's go to it. I need vindication. No, I'm wrong. I'm wrong. Uh, the Yom Kippur War, also known as the Ramadan War, the October War. Okay, so those are the alternate names. But whatever, okay, 20 days, fine, whatever. So 20 days, 6 days, and then let's look at this one right here. I'm going to go to the actual thing because it has a little counter. Uh, the very first war, the War of Independence, was only 9 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days. So very short. And you could say it was short because Israel came out victorious, but I just can't help but to wonder if it would be the same the other way around. If Israel had lost God's favor, or if not lost God's favor, but if it was no longer protected miraculously like it has been before, then maybe the reverse would be true. It would still be a very quick war, but the other way around, where Israel does not win until Christ comes, of course. So they have a table down here where it shows you the results of all these wars. And here you have Israel, victory, Sinai War, victory, 6-Day War, victory, War of Attrition, both sides claim victory, Yom Kippur War, victory, Operation Litani, victory, First Lebanon War, tactical victories, strategic failure, so kind of ambiguous, Security Zone Campaign, defeat, First Intifada, which isn't really like a war, it's more of like a kind of like a rebellion or an uprising, but ended with Oslo 1 Accords. Second Intifada, victory for Israel. Second Lebanon War, stalemate. Operation Cast Lead, victory. Operation Pillar of Defense, victory. Operation Protective Edge, both sides claim victory. And then the Israel-Palestine Crisis 2021, both sides claimed victory. But generally speaking, Israel has had a very impressive record of winning conflicts, right? Okay, so looking at the War of Independence, now this is kind of astounding, and some of you, I'm sure, already know all about this, but okay. Even as Israel declared its statehood on May 14th, 1948, 5 mechanized Arab armies invaded. Armies. 5 armies. The Jews had only 35,000 fighting men. No air force, except a small training plane, out of which the pilot dropped a grenade. Seems like that's probably pretty effective. And only 6 tanks. The Egyptian army alone had 40,000 soldiers. Okay? That's out of 5 different armies. One of the armies had 40,000 compared to Israel's only 35. And then 135 tanks compared to 6 tanks, heavy guns, and an air force of over 60 planes. And I'm guessing that they weren't all trainers for and used for like dropping grenades outside of them, including Spitfires and bombers. The Jordanians had the Arab Legion, which trained by the British and led by the Englishman Sir John Bagot Glubb, along with 48 British officers. Yet, against all odds, the Jewish fighters won. Many of the pitched battles became epic and smacked of the miraculous. Now, there's like different stories out there. There's like, I think at least a couple where they talk about angels appearing and then the Arab or whatever army it was like fleeing away. And who knows if that's true? I haven't like really dug into it. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised at all if those are true. Because something miraculous happened. How in the world do you go from a brand new country, you don't really even have a military, and you fight off 5 already established countries with their militaries? How does that happen? And then you win. So look at this. For example, the Egyptian army launched an attack along the Mediterranean coast against the kibbutz Yad Mordechai on May 19th, 1948. If you don't know what a kibbutz is, it's like a communal farm, essentially, as part of an offensive to take Tel Aviv. 2 infantry battalions, 1 armored battalion, and 1 artillery battalion expected to take the kibbutz of 130 residents in 3 hours. You guys, a battalion is okay. So this is the way that it goes. I'm gonna try and do this in like church terms. So how would this go? How would this go? A battalion would be kind of like the size of like a like if you were like to translate church units into military units. Okay. So say that like elders quorum and relief society and young men's and women's, like let's say that those are companies. So that's like your base unit. No, okay, no, let's just simplify. Let's say that your ward is a company, okay? A military company. The next higher unit would be a battalion, in the army anyway. I don't think. Oh yeah, it's the Marines. They don't have brigades, but they have regiments, but they're basically the same thing. Anyway, so just imagine like a stake. A stake is several wards. So basically, it's a good size unit. Okay, so 2 infantry stakes, 1 armored stake, and 1 artillery stake. Expected to take the kibbutz of 130 residents. The battle raged for days. How does that? It's 130 people. They're not even all probably fighting age. A lot of them are probably children and stuff. The Jewish defenders held off the entire Egyptian army much longer than anyone expected, using homemade weapons that many times did nothing more than make noise. So, okay, so the point of me reading this is to show you that their inception was miraculous, and the fact that they're still here is miraculous. And you can read all sorts of things that talks about that tell you all the miracles of Israel. I want to read this. This is called The Miracle of Israel by Aish. I'm going to read part of it. Okay, so after the war of independence, how somehow they beat 5 armies. Okay, after that, or during that, while Israel was winning that war, 4,400 volunteer soldiers came to its aid from 56 countries. A full 1% of its population were killed in battle. That would be the equivalent of America losing 3 million soldiers today. Israel was also busy tripling its population. To put that in perspective, the world's richest, most immigrant-friendly countries absorb a fraction of that. The USA absorbed 3% of its population in the last 10 years. Israel had a tiny economy and was stretched to its limits before it began. Less than 100 years ago, there were only 2,600 Jews in the country. Now there were 630,000. We're talking about the time of the War of Independence. The population had already exploded by 50 times before this tripling. Fledgling Israel had a huge challenge. It simply did not have the food to feed the massive influx of people, nor the housing for them to live in. Lacking any natural resources, half of Israel's tiny size is desert, and almost no large industry to provide employment. It also lacked the healthcare system or infrastructure to absorb such a tsunami of immigrants. Could you imagine back in those days moving from, you know, you're a Jew and you're in East Europe, or you're in the United States or something like that. Israel finally becomes a country and you're like really excited, and then you go there and there's nothing. There's no food, no jobs. There's just like nothing, and they're like winning this war. It's so insane to think about. Okay, but that didn't stop them from doing it. And consider the immigrants. Of the 1.2 million arrivals, a third were penniless, broken, uh, survivors of this, whose entire families had been murdered. Facing yet another existential threat, 23,000 of them were conscripted into Israel's new army as they landed and given 2 weeks of military training. The other two-thirds, who came a year later, were refugees from Muslim countries where they had lived for centuries, also arriving destitute and devastated. Israel airlifted 50,000 Jews from Yemen and 120,000 from Iraq. Israel has absorbed more immigrants per capita than any other country in history. Yeah, because they're all returning. And think about this. This is as the result of Orson Hyde and others going to the Holy Land to dedicate it for the return, for the gathering. You know, we read all this, but we can't forget the reason why it's happening. And it has to do with the restoration of the church. It has to do with prophecy. It has to do with the restored church sending a man, uh, just like it was only, what was it? I think it was like 9 years or maybe 10 years after the church was organized. One of the first things that they did, they sent someone, Orson Hyde, to the Holy Land to dedicate it. And look at this happening, how just like, it just like in such a miraculous way. Of the new immigrants, none could speak the local language, Hebrew. After all, Israel had just accomplished another event in world history, reviving an unspoken language after 2,000 years, bringing spoken Hebrew back to life just decades before the state's founding. While many could read the ancient script of the Bible, communicating in Hebrew was a different story entirely. Yeah, I did a video about that because I was encouraging people to, learn a different language, but maybe consider Hebrew. That's what I'm doing right now. It's going really slow, but it's been very rewarding already. But it was a dead language. It was only used in a ecclesiastical setting, like in the synagogue while reading scriptures. But it was brought back to life. So, okay, with no common language and hailing from dozens of wildly disparate cultures, 1.2 million people had to be absorbed by 600,000, housed in homes that did not exist, fed, taught a new language, educated, and employed. While fighting an impossible war for its survival with its hands tied behind its back, Israel proceeded to found 28 new agricultural communities in a couple of years, 400 in the first decade, and another 25 brand new towns, in another 25 brand new towns where previously there had been no electricity, water, or roads. Israel's founding fathers handled every mind-boggling challenge. They had to invent a country from scratch. Within months, they created a justice system, police force, courts, and laws, an entire government. They quickly proceeded to run the first democratic elections in the Middle East, which is still the Middle East's only real democracy. Okay, so you understand, and I'm sure that you probably understood before, but this was like a very unlikely thing to happen. It happened because of miracles, and I'm sure that those miracles continue today. I'm sure that if the Lord wasn't protecting Israel all these 75 years, it probably would have ceased to exist a number of different times over. So why wouldn't it be that at one particular moment, the Lord could allow Israel's enemies to come in when the time is right and very quickly invade and lay siege to Jerusalem itself, quicker than maybe you and me have time to really prepare for. All right, let's take a look at Israel's enemies. This is an older article. I think this was, it says 2017. So they have Egypt, Syria, Iran, Jordan, Turkey, according to this article. This is Jewish Voice. And we're going to look at the details of these different countries. So Egypt was the leading nation that fought against Israel in all of her past wars, 1948, 67, and 73. Now, it is almost certain that Egypt will be much more hostile toward Israel than in the past. Of great concern is this group right here. Let's take a look at the comparison. So there's this really cool website called globalfirepower.com. I don't know how accurate it is, but it seems like a lot of effort got put into this, so I'm sure that it's at least somewhat correct. So, oh, this wasn't supposed to be Saudi Arabia. Egypt. Okay. So they give all these countries like this power index. So the lower the number, the more powerful. Okay, I don't know how they calculate it, but Egypt, out of the entire world, has a rank of 14, and Israel has a rank of 18. And then they have like the comparison brief. So when it comes to manpower, Egypt uh, would win over Israel. Air power, no. Land power, yes. Naval power, natural resources, yes. Financials, no. Logistics and geography, yes. So generally speaking, it looks like Egypt would probably win. Of course, this is a very overly simplified thing. It's believed that Israel has nuclear weapons. I've seen that a number of different times, so that would obviously probably change the dynamics of a war if it came down to it. But nevertheless, if we're just looking at conventional war, excluding nuclear weapons, if it came down to that, then Egypt probably has it up on Israel. But air power is kind of a big deal. Um, that can really win wars, is having a strong air force. But anyway, there's that. And then I have this pulled up. This is from Wikipedia just to get an idea of where we're at with Egypt. Okay, Egypt-Israeli relations are foreign relations between Egypt and Israel. The state of war, the state of war between both countries, which date back to the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, or the War of Independence, culminated in the Yom Kippur War in 1973 and was followed by the 1979 Egypt-Israel Peace Treaty a year after the Camp David Accords, mediated by U.S. President Jimmy Carter. Full diplomatic relations were established on January 26, 1980, and the formal exchange of ambassadors took place one month later on February 26, 1980, with Eliyahu ben Elazar serving as the first Israeli ambassador to Egypt, and Saad Mortada as the first Egyptian ambassador to Israel. Egypt has an embassy in Tel Aviv and a consulate in Eilat. Israel has an embassy in Cairo and a consulate in Alexandria. Peace between Egypt and Israel has lasted for more than 40 years, and Egypt has become an important strategic partner of Israel. In January 2011, Benjamin Ben Eliezer, a former defense minister known for his close ties to Egyptian officials, stated that, quote, Egypt is not only our closest friend in the region, the cooperation between us goes beyond the strategic. Nevertheless, the relationship is sometimes described as a cold peace, quote unquote, with many in Egypt skeptical about its effectiveness. According to the 2019-2020 survey, 13% of Egyptians support diplomatic recognition of Israel, while 85% oppose. The Arab-Israeli conflict kept relations cool, and against Israel incitement is prevalent in the Egyptian media. So, who knows what to think about that. Things seem to be kind of okay right now, but it seems like the majority of people in Egypt are against Israel. Relations have improved significantly between Israel and Egypt after the removal of Morsi from office in July 2013, with close military cooperation over the Sinai insurgency. Notably, Israel has permitted Egypt to increase its number of troops deployed in the Sinai Peninsula beyond the terms of the peace treaty. These developments, along with deteriorating Israel-Jordan relations, have led some to brand Egypt as Israel's closest ally in the Arab world, while others assert that relations remain relatively cold. Sisi has maintained the policy of previous Egyptian presidents of pledging not to visit Israel until Israel recognizes Palestinian statehood, although his foreign minister, Sameh Shoukry, has visited Israel. On the 2nd of July 2015, one day after the attacks on 15 Egyptian army checkpoints, Israel announced that it was giving Egypt, quote, free hand to operate in the southern Sinai against local groups, voluntary ignoring in annex to the. Okay, so anyway, so that's kind of like what things are like with Egypt and Israel. Okay, so that's that. And then we got Syria. Syria has been another opponent of Israel in all her past wars and remains an enemy to Israel to this day. Let me pull up Syria. Okay, the two countries have been locked in a perpetual war since the establishment of Israel in 1948, with their most significant and direct armed engagements being in the First Arab-Israeli War in 1948 to 1949, the Third Arab-Israeli War in 1967, and the Fourth Arab-Israeli War in 1973. Additionally, Israeli and Syrian forces also saw relatively extensive combat against each other during the Lebanese Civil War, the 1982 Lebanon War, as well as the War of Attrition. Both sides have at times signed and held armistice agreements, although all efforts to achieve complete peace have been without success. Syria has never recognized Israel as a legitimate state. It does not accept Israeli passports as legally valid for entry into Syrian territory. Israel likewise regards Syria as a hostile state and generally prohibits its citizens from traveling there, with some exceptions and special accommodations being made by both countries for Druze people residing in Syria and the Golan Heights, regarded by the United Nations as Syrian territory occupied by Israel since 1967. Israel and Syria have never established formal diplomatic relations since the inception of both countries in the mid-20th century. The state of peace at the Israel-Syria ceasefire line. Okay, I'm not going to do this. This is too much reading. I thought this was going to go better, but I guess not. So let's just look at the matchups. So let's save Saudi Arabia for last. So Egypt, like it says here, they are ranked 14. Israel is 18. So Egypt would, I don't know, possibly win. I don't know. They're viewed as stronger. But Syria is a lot lower than Israel. Syria is 64. The only thing that Israel has over Israel is land power, natural resources, logistics, and geography, but not financials, naval power, air power, or manpower. We have Iran, and in the case of Iran, Iran looks like it has the advantage, except for when it comes to air power. Their green checks all the way down except for air power and geography. And they are one rank above Israel at 17, which that's kind of an interesting matchup because Iran is Israel's biggest enemy, and you have 17 and 18. We've talked a lot about 17 and 18 on this channel. Jordan is really, really low at a rank of 81, and they don't have any advantages over Israel in this comparison brief except for geography. Iraq, well, they're a 45, so that's also very low. All they really have militarily is like more manpower, but nothing else. Okay. And then here's like the overall rankings. You have the United States in the number 1 spot. You have Russia at number 2, China at number 3, and then India. And then you have Pakistan. I have a hard time seeing Pakistan going against Israel, but anything's possible, I guess. But Pakistan is at number 7. They have nuclear bombs, but I've never heard of like any like real conflicts or anything between Pakistan and Israel. That's probably mostly because of geography, because Pakistan is way in the heck over here on the other side of Iran. And I know that they are kind of more, whenever I hear about Pakistan, they're mostly having problems with India. There's disputes over the Kashmir region. And then whatever. But okay, so let's go back to this. And then you have Turkey. Now Turkey has been kind of against Israel, but Turkey is part of NATO, so I don't know how that would work out if Turkey would ever join in an attack against Israel because of that reason, but I don't really understand how those things work. Let's see. Israel-Turkey relations were formalized in March 1949 when Turkey was the first Muslim-majority country to recognize the State of Israel. Both countries gave high priority to military, strategic, and diplomatic cooperation while sharing concerns with respect to the regional instabilities in the Middle East. Despite relations between the two countries having increased, despite Despite relations between the two countries having increasingly deteriorated in recent decades, the two countries normalized relations in 2022. And there's President Herzog. I don't know if I highlighted anything else from this. No. Let's see. Here's Egypt. Okay, they're at 14. Egypt and Iran above Israel. Okay, and then let's talk about Saudi Arabia really quick. Okay, now Saudi Arabia is below Israel at a rank of 22, but they have green check marks when it comes to manpower, air power, and naval power, but not land power. But they still have that lower ranking. Now, there's something that's happened within recent weeks with Saudi Arabia that's kind of concerning, and I don't know if this is going to help lead to that final war. So this is from Forbes. Why did Saudi Arabia realign toward Iran and what it means for us all? The sudden overture of friendship between, or sorry, the sudden overture of friendship recently by Saudi Arabia toward Iran baffled everyone. Yeah, it did me when I saw that. I was like, what? Is that for real? Or is that just like some kind of like lesser just thing that they're doing? Or is this like significant? Well, it seems like it was significant. A lot of throat clearing ensued about China brokering the deal and the US being left out. Some blamed Biden and compared him unfavorably to Trump during whose tenure the Saudis thawed toward Israel. Some played down the Saudi-Iran initiative's significance, not the least the White House arguing that the Saudis still maintain a distance from Iran, a kind of cold peace. Trouble is, Riyadh, which is Saudi Arabia's capital city, trouble is, Riyadh has also made moves to re-embrace Syria's Iran-backed Assad regime, and other Gulf states are following suit. And we know that Syria is definitely against Israel. Normalizing with Iran and actively re-accepting Iran's closest ally doesn't sound like passive neutrality by Saudi. So what exactly is going on, and why are the Saudis realigning the region's power contours unilaterally with their demarche toward Iran? Consider the timing of Saudi Arabia's Iran decision. Soon after Bibi Netanyahu crafted a coalition with hardline Israeli parties and announced annexations on the West Bank. So this government that's been formed with Benjamin Netanyahu, it's very what some would consider or describe as far right, very religious. It's really backed by the ultra Orthodox and the Orthodox. And so that would go against, Muslim interests. And so, Saudi Arabia doesn't like that. That's basically what this is saying is like, oh, so you're going to have that kind of government, huh? And then later, the fact is the Saudi royal family has always worried about its own legitimacy, its stability, and its hold on the kingdom ever since the British handed them the territory in 1927. Intra-familial, tribal, and religious divisions have constantly threatened the monarchy. Above all, their role as leaders of Islam and to some extent the ethnic Arabs added incalculable pressures. So yes, they made a historic deal with Israel hatched under Trump, but only at the cost of exposing themselves to acute criticism whenever Palestinian-Israeli relations went south, as it was done under Netanyahu recently. So in other words, they want to the Saudi royal family want to maintain control, and they're kind of on shaky grounds a little bit. They're concerned about losing power and stuff like that, and they're viewed as having a role of leadership in Islam. I think because of the fact that you have Medina and you have Mecca that are located in um, that are located in Saudi Arabia, and these two are the two most holiest sites in Islam. Mecca being first, and then Medina being second. And then after that, the third would be Jerusalem, specifically the Al Aqsa Mosque. So they have this leadership role in Islam. They're viewed as kind of leaders to ethnic Arabs in general. And within their own country, they don't want to lose power. And most, if not all, the Arab world really doesn't like this new government. And so you can see why Saudi Arabia might be like, okay, maybe we'll change sides. Because, Trump's not here. He's not here anymore. If he was, I'm sure that he would try and get them to stick with the U.S. and the West, but he's not here. Okay, so you have that. Okay, the U.S. is withdrawing from oil, whereas Iran and Russia are oil enthusiasts, as is China. In that regard, most crucially, they're on the same side. Morally and politically, they also align as socially conservative and authoritarian. Whereas the US keeps meddling globally in impossible ways. I don't understand this sentence, but anyway, they're not happy with this right here. Different philosophies of men that are flourishing here in the US and in the West. So it's like a response to this strongly kind of like religious and to the right um, government in Israel, right? And then oil is like the next big thing. What else was there? Okay, and then is that it? That's in here. Okay, well, so basically that wanting to keep their status, wanting to keep their power. Um, and so new government in Israel, oil, and they line up more socially with the other countries anyway, as far as like their um, morals and form of government and stuff like that go. They're more similar. So it seems like that's why that's happening. So that's obviously not good for Israel. Where did that map go? So yeah, just everything's kind of turned a little bit more against Israel. And the new government isn't really helping. And then the overlap of the holidays and then what's going on in Ukraine, which seems to be emboldening China. And China is really starting to really eye Taiwan. And the United States and the West are kind of, have their focus divided and they're focusing on other things other than Israel. And you have the judicial reform that they're talking about and wanting to push through, which is dividing the country apart. And Iran is getting ever closer to being able to produce nuclear bombs, which means that Israel will probably do preemptive attacks on Iran to stop that from happening, which will probably inflame things even further. And yeah, just things aren't good. And because Israel is so small, especially when you consider the population density, which is basically just right here, and because prophecy says that they are going to be invaded, I think that it could happen pretty quickly. I don't think it would probably be pretty intense because Israel does have a strong military, and they presumably have nuclear bombs. But even so, I think that if things went a certain way, if there was some kind of like flashpoint event or something that like galvanized the Middle East against Israel, I think that it could happen very, very quick. And it's interesting that the meteor was over northern Israel because it's my understanding the way that I'd have to double check it, but the way that the scriptures read is that Gog and Magog are in the north, and that like the invasion basically comes mostly from the north, which would be in the direction of Syria, Lebanon. So I don't know what to tell you, other than I think things can happen very fast. As we think about Adam on Diamond, New Jerusalem, Christ's appearance to the Jews, and then Christ's appearance to the world, I don't know why all those things couldn't happen within a week of each other. It could just be like bam, bam, bam. You know, I tend to think that Adam on Diamond could have already started. I'm not sure that it's completed, and I say that it's. I think it could have started because of all the hints that have been dropped by President Nelson, Sister Nelson, and others. Um, in things that we've done, like the April 2020 General Conference with the Hosanna shout and all the special things that happened then. So yeah, those are all the reasons why I think things could happen really quick. Um, yeah, okay. I think that's all I have to say about this one. Sorry, I know that this video was kind of rough, but it was kind of hard for me to put it all together. It really was a lot of work, and I was gonna go over like a lot more, but it just would have been too much. But yeah. Okay. Well, that's going to be it for this one. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video. If you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also, make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.